Hello there, and welcome to Just About Earth, a quiet place where curiosity slows down, science softens its voice, and big questions are allowed to wander without needing to hurry anywhere in particular. Tonight, wherever you happen to be listening from, we're going to explore an idea that sounds unsettling at first, but becomes strangely calming the longer you sit with it. It's a thought that begins with a simple shift in perspective, a small tilt of the head, like looking at a familiar landscape from a different window. What if Earth was never meant for humans? Before we go any further, take a moment to notice where you are right now. Maybe you're lying in bed with the lights already dimmed. Maybe you're on a couch, or sitting somewhere quiet, letting the day loosen its grip. What part of the world are you in? And what time is it there? Not the time you're supposed to be asleep or awake, not the time on a schedule, but the time it feels like in your body right now. Early, late, somewhere in between. It's always interesting, isn't it, that a question about our place on Earth is being asked by people scattered across the planet, each of us held by the same ground, breathing the same air, rotating together through space, yet all arriving at this moment from very different directions. If you find this space soothing, or if these slow explorations help you unwind, I'd really appreciate it if you gave the video a like or subscribe to the channel. It helps this quiet corner reach others who might need a gentle place to rest their thoughts. There's no rush with any of that. For now, all you need to do is listen and let the ideas settle at their own pace. The phrase "meant for" carries a lot of weight. We use it casually all the time. This job was meant for you. That place feels like it was meant to be home. This moment was meant to happen. When we say Earth was meant for humans, we usually don't stop to question what that really implies. It suggests intention, design, a kind of cosmic planning meeting where someone or something looked at the swirling gases and molten rock of the early planet and decided, eventually, this would be perfect for upright primates with fragile skin, narrow temperature tolerances, and a tendency to worry about rent. But when you step back and look at Earth without the filter of human comfort, something becomes immediately clear. This planet is not gentle by default. It never has been. Most of its surface is covered by salt water we can't drink. Large portions of its land are too hot, too cold, too dry, too high, or too unstable for us to survive without help. The ground shifts. The weather turns suddenly. The sun burns. Microorganisms we can't see can end our lives. Even the air that keeps us alive becomes dangerous if its balance shifts slightly out of range. And yet, we're here. Not just surviving, but building cities, writing stories, asking questions like this one. So when we wonder whether Earth was meant for humans, we're not asking whether life is possible here. That part is obvious. We're asking something more subtle. Are we the point of the story, or are we just one of its many outcomes? It can feel uncomfortable to consider the idea that Earth doesn't center us. Humans have a long history of placing themselves at the middle of things. For thousands of years, we believed the planet itself sat at the center of the universe, with everything else circling politely around it. Even after we let go of that idea, we kept the habit in quieter ways. We talk about natural disasters as if nature has violated an agreement. We describe environments as hostile or forgiving based on how well they suit us, not on any inherent quality they possess. But Earth doesn't experience hostility or kindness. It doesn't register in convenience or comfort. It operates according to physical processes that were in motion long before humans appeared, and will continue long after we're gone. Plate tectonics don't slow down for cities. Viruses don't recognize intention. Gravity doesn't adjust itself to spare our joints. The planet does what it does, continuously, without pause or preference. If Earth were truly meant for humans, you might expect it to be a little more accommodating. You might expect fewer sharp edges, a narrower range of deadly temperatures, maybe fewer substances that poison us on contact. You might expect our bodies to be better suited to the conditions we encounter every day. But look closely, and you start to notice how many compromises are involved in simply existing here. Our spines struggle with gravity over time. Our eyes are easily damaged by the same sunlight that makes life possible. Our skin needs protection from the atmosphere we evolved in. We choke easily. We bleed easily. We overheat. We freeze. We require a very specific mix of oxygen, pressure, temperature, and nutrients just to function normally, and even then, things go wrong with surprising regularity. This isn't a complaint, it's an observation, one that becomes more interesting the longer you sit with it. Because despite all this, life on Earth has been astonishingly successful, just not in a way that points toward us as the goal. For nearly 4 billion years, life existed without humans. For most of that time, it existed without anything resembling us. Single-celled organisms dominated the planet for far longer than complex animals ever have. Even now, bacteria outweigh us by an enormous margin, both in biomass and resilience. They thrive in boiling water, frozen ice, acidic pools, radioactive waste. Places we would last minutes, if that. From Earth's perspective, if it has one, humans are a recent experiment. We've been around for a blink of geological time. If the planet's history were compressed into a single day, modern humans would appear only in the final seconds before midnight. And already in those seconds, we've managed to alter the atmosphere, reshape landscapes, and trigger changes that will echo for millions of years. That alone should give us pause, not because it makes us villains, but because it highlights how mismatched our instincts are to the scale of the system we live within. We evolved to respond to immediate threats and rewards. Hunger, shelter, social bonds. We did not evolve to intuitively understand feedback loops that unfold over centuries, or ecosystems that span continents. So when we imagine Earth as something built for us, we're projecting our own way of thinking onto a process that doesn't operate with intention at all. Planets don't have goals. They don't prepare environments with future species in mind. They form from dust and gravity, heat and collision. Everything that follows is the result of physics playing out under specific conditions, not a plan waiting to be fulfilled. And yet, here's where the thought becomes quieter rather than harsher. The fact that Earth was not designed for us does not mean we don't belong here. It means our presence is the result of an ongoing relationship, not a guarantee. We are shaped by this planet, and in turn we shape parts of it, sometimes clumsily, sometimes thoughtfully, often without realizing the full consequences. Consider how much of our daily life depends on buffering ourselves from Earth rather than embracing it directly. Walls, roofs, heating, cooling, clothing, medicine. These are not luxuries in many cases, they are translations. Ways of making a planet that runs on its own terms legible to fragile bodies like ours. Without them, large parts of the world would be inaccessible to us. Even something as simple as agriculture is an act of negotiation. We don't just accept what the land offers. We clear it, fence it, irrigate it, protect it from other species that would happily eat what we plant. Farming isn't Earth providing food for humans. It's humans persuading small patches of Earth to behave differently than they would on their own. This doesn't make us unnatural, it makes us participants. But it does challenge the idea that the planet is fundamentally aligned with our needs. Most species fit into their environments without reshaping them at such a scale. Humans are unusual in how much effort we expend to make the world livable for ourselves, and how quickly things fall apart when that effort stops. There's a subtle shift that happens when you let go of the idea that Earth was made for us. Responsibility starts to replace entitlement. If the planet isn't obligated to sustain us indefinitely, then survival becomes something we actively maintain, not something we assume. Comfort becomes a temporary arrangement, not a birthright. This way of thinking can sound bleak, but it often has the opposite effect. When you stop expecting the world to take care of you automatically, you begin to notice how much care is already involved in simply staying alive. Every breath depends on ancient processes. Every glass of water carries the outcome of countless interactions between rock, gravity, and time. Every calm evening exists because, for now, the systems that support it are still holding together, and perhaps that's why this question fits so well into a space meant for rest. Because recognizing our place as contingent rather than central doesn't have to be frightening. It can be grounding. You're here not because the universe owed you a place, but because a long chain of improbable events made room for you, briefly, on a planet that does not pause, but does allow. As you listen, you might notice your breathing settling into its own rhythm, in and out, without instruction. That rhythm connects you directly to the atmosphere, to plants, to microorganisms, to processes that don't know your name but sustain you anyway. Earth doesn't have intentions, but it does have patterns, and you are woven into them, whether or not you were ever the point. This idea will take us further into how life adapts without preference, how evolution works without foresight, and how human bodies, societies, and technologies reflect a constant effort to live on a planet that never promised to be comfortable. None of this arrives all at once. It unfolds slowly, like the planet itself has always done. For now, there's no need to draw conclusions. Just let the question stay open. What if Earth was never meant for humans? Not as an accusation, not as a warning, just as a way of seeing the ground beneath you with a little more honesty, and maybe a little more care as the story continues to move forward without stopping. When people talk about Earth as a welcoming place, they usually mean it feels familiar. The ground beneath their feet feels solid, the air feels breathable, the day-night cycle feels predictable enough to build routines around. But familiarity is not the same as hospitality, and comfort is not the same as invitation. Earth did not prepare itself for humans, did not adjust its systems in anticipation of our arrival, and certainly did not soften its edges once we showed up. It simply continued doing what it had always done, long before anyone was around to label those conditions as good or bad. If planets could sign documents, Earth never signed a welcome letter. There was no agreement stating that this surface would remain stable, that the climate would stay within a narrow range, or that the chemistry of the oceans and atmosphere would remain ideal for a single species. What we experience as livable conditions are not promises. They are temporary states in a system that is always changing. To understand this, it helps to step back to a time when the planet was entirely unrecognizable. Early Earth was violent in a way that's difficult to imagine from the calm of a quiet room. The surface was molten, the atmosphere was toxic, meteor impacts were frequent enough to reshape continents. Volcanoes poured gases into the sky. There was no oxygen to breathe, no soil to stand on, no gentle coastline to admire. Nothing about that world suggested it was preparing for upright mammals with language and sleep schedules. Even after life appeared, Earth remained indifferent to comfort. The first organisms were microscopic and resilient, thriving in environments that would kill us almost instantly. Oxygen, which we now depend on, was originally a waste product that nearly wiped out existing life when it began to accumulate. The great oxygenation event didn't happen because the planet wanted complex life. It happened because certain organisms altered their environment, and everything else had to adapt or disappear. That pattern repeats throughout Earth's history. Ice ages come and go, sea levels rise and fall, entire ecosystems vanish, replaced by others that take advantage of new conditions. Mass extinctions are not rare interruptions, they are recurring features. Life doesn't progress smoothly toward greater comfort or intelligence. It responds, improvises, collapses, and reorganizes. From that perspective, humans are not the beneficiaries of a carefully tuned planet. We are the outcome of surviving a very narrow set of conditions within a much broader range of possibilities. The temperature range we tolerate is small. The chemical balance we need is precise. The gravity we live under is just manageable enough to allow our bodies to function without collapsing or floating away. None of this was arranged for us. It simply happened to align long enough for our lineage to persist. Even now, most of Earth is actively hostile to human life. Stand in the open ocean without equipment, and survival is measured in minutes. Walk into a desert without preparation, and dehydration sets in quickly. Climb too high into the mountains, and the air thins beyond usefulness. Move too far toward the poles, and cold overwhelms the body. Dive too deep, and pressure crushes tissue. Earth offers pockets of tolerability, not blanket accommodation. What's striking is how much effort humans invest in pretending otherwise. Cities give the impression of control, climate-controlled buildings, artificial lighting, constant access to food and water. These environments feel stable, but they are fragile overlays on top of systems that do not stop for us. Power grids fail, supply chains break, storms override infrastructure. When those layers thin, Earth's indifference becomes visible again. This doesn't mean the planet is cruel. Cruelty implies intent. Earth has none. The planet does not react to human presence with approval or rejection. It responds only to physical forces. Heat moves from warmer places to cooler ones. Water flows downhill. Pressure builds until it's released. Life that fits the conditions continues. Life that doesn't ends. When we say Earth never signed a welcome letter, we're really saying it never guaranteed permanence. The stability we experience now is unusual in the long view. Climate has swung wildly in the past. Atmospheric composition has changed dramatically. Sea levels have risen and fallen hundreds of meters. Forests have turned into deserts and back again. Species that once dominated the planet are now known only through fossils. Humans tend to interpret the current moment as normal because it's the one we know. But Earth's definition of normal is much broader. From the planet's perspective, the last few thousand years of relative climatic stability are a brief pause between more chaotic phases, and even that pause is uneven, filled with regional extremes, unpredictable weather, and constant movement beneath the surface. It's also worth noticing how often survival depends on luck rather than fit. Our ancestors did not thrive because Earth favoured them. They persisted because small populations adapted just enough, just in time to shifting conditions. A slightly colder climate here, a drier period there, a volcanic eruption, a changing food source. Survival was never assured. It was negotiated generation by generation. This framing changes how we think about the idea of belonging. Belonging suggests acceptance. Earth does not accept or reject species, it simply permits them temporarily. Humans are permitted here for now because the conditions still fall within a narrow range we can manage, especially with technology. That permission can be withdrawn without warning, not through decision, but through change. And yet, there's something strangely grounding about this realization. If Earth was never meant for us, then our presence here is not something we're entitled to, but something we participate in. We are not the reason the planet exists. We are one of its many outcomes shaped by forces far older and larger than ourselves. This perspective also removes a certain pressure. If the planet wasn't built to cater to us, then the difficulties we face are not personal failures. Droughts, storms, diseases, earthquakes, these are not punishments. They are features of a dynamic system. Understanding that doesn't make them less destructive, but it does make them less moral. The planet is not angry. It is active. Humans often describe nature as turning against us, especially during disasters, but that language assumes a prior alliance that never existed. Rivers flood because gravity and rainfall dictate it. Fires spread because heat, fuel, and oxygen align. Earthquakes happen because tectonic plates move whether or not cities sit on top of them. Recognizing this can change how we respond. Instead of asking why the planet allowed something to happen, we start asking how its systems work and how we might live within them more carefully. That shift from expectation to observation is subtle, but important. It replaces disappointment with attention. there's also a quieter implication that often goes unnoticed. If Earth was not meant for humans, then meaning does not come from the planet itself. It comes from what humans bring to their time here: relationships, curiosity, care, responsibility. None of those are guaranteed by geography or climate. They are choices made within conditions that do not bend to accommodate them. The idea of a welcoming planet is comforting, but it can also make us careless. If we assume Earth is fundamentally aligned with us, we might believe it will recover automatically from whatever we do to it. But if we understand that the planet does not prioritize us, then damage becomes more serious. Systems do not repair themselves for our sake. They change according to physics and biology, not fairness. At the same time, this understanding does not require despair. Life has always adapted, and humans are particularly good at adaptation when we choose to be attentive rather than entitled. The lack of a welcome letter does not mean the door is closed. It means the room was never arranged with us in mind, and we are responsible for how we move through it. As this thought settles, it becomes easier to see human history differently, not as a steady climb toward dominance, but as a series of responses to a planet that never stopped being unpredictable. Shelter was invented because exposure was dangerous. Clothing existed because skin alone wasn't enough. Medicine developed because bodies break down easily here. Culture emerged because cooperation improved survival odds in a world that did not guarantee safety. Even language reflects this relationship. We talk about fighting the elements, conquering nature, taming the land. These metaphors reveal how often Earth resists our presence, and how much effort goes into maintaining the illusion of control. But control is temporary. Maintenance is constant. The planet does not rest. This doesn't need to feel heavy as you listen. In fact, many people find the opposite happens. Letting go of the idea that Earth owes us comfort can feel strangely relieving. It allows you to appreciate stability when it exists without assuming it must. A quiet night, a safe place to sleep, a moment of stillness. These are not defaults. They are conditions that happen to be in place right now. As you continue listening, you might notice how your body interacts with the planet even in rest. Gravity pressing gently, air moving in and out, temperature regulating itself through layers and walls. None of these processes pause, even as your thoughts slow. Earth continues doing what it does, steadily, without reference to your awareness of it. Long before humans wondered whether they belonged here, Earth was already busy doing what it does best. It was forming systems, testing combinations, sustaining life in ways that did not require observers or questions. From the planet's point of view, thriving never depended on intelligence, reflection, or awareness. It depended on chemistry, energy, and time. And for most of its history, Earth thrived quite well without anything remotely human involved. If you could stand at the edge of time and watch Earth unfold, the absence of humans would not feel like a gap. It would feel normal. For billions of years, the planet operated under conditions that would be fatal to us, yet perfectly suitable for other forms of life. Oceans churned with microbial ecosystems. Continents drifted slowly across the surface. Atmospheres thickened, thinned, and transformed. Life appeared, vanished, and reappeared in new forms without any sense of loss or progress. The earliest life on Earth was simple, resilient, and extraordinarily patient. Single-celled organisms dominated the planet for far longer than complex life ever has. They required no shelter, no clothing, no protection from radiation. Many of them still don't. They live deep underground, in boiling water, inside rocks, beneath ice sheets. They thrive in places we consider uninhabitable, because their definition of survival is not tied to comfort or longevity as we understand it. From Earth's perspective, these organisms were a success. They reproduced efficiently, adapted quickly, and altered the planet in profound ways. Oxygen-producing bacteria reshaped the atmosphere. Microbial mats stabilized sediments. Chemical cycles emerged that still regulate climate and nutrient flow today. None of this was preparation for humans. It was life doing what life does when conditions allow it to persist. Even when complex life finally emerged, it did not move in a straight line toward anything resembling us. The fossil record is filled with strange experiments, bodies with unfamiliar symmetries, creatures that defy modern categories, entire branches of life that flourished briefly and then disappeared completely. Earth did not refine life toward a single ideal. It explored many possibilities, most of which ended without descendants. For hundreds of millions of years, forests rose and fell without mammals ever setting foot among them. Giant insects filled the air when oxygen levels were higher. Reptiles ruled the land for far longer than humans have existed, thriving in climates that shifted repeatedly. Dinosaurs lived through periods of warmth, cold, drought, and abundance, adapting in ways that worked until they didn't. When the asteroid struck that ended their reign, Earth did not mourn. It adjusted. Dust filled the sky, temperatures dropped, ecosystems collapsed. And then, gradually, new life filled the gaps. Small mammals that had lived in the shadows expanded into newly available niches. Birds diversified. Plants changed. The planet continued its processes uninterrupted, indifferent to which species occupied the surface. This pattern is essential to understand. Earth does not measure success by permanence. Thriving does not mean lasting forever. It means functioning within current conditions. When those conditions change, thriving shifts accordingly. Species that once dominated vanish. Others take their place. The system as a whole continues, even when individual components do not. Humans tend to equate thriving with stability. We imagine a world that stays predictable, seasons that behave themselves, coastlines that remain where they are. But Earth's history shows that thriving often involves instability. Periods of intense change are not exceptions, they are drivers of transformation. Ice ages repeatedly covered large portions of the planet. Sea levels dropped and rose dramatically. Deserts expanded and retreated. Rainforests migrated. These shifts did not make Earth less alive. They reshaped where and how life persisted. What we now call extreme conditions were, at various times, standard operating states. During many of these periods, Earth supported ecosystems far more productive than those humans rely on today. Ancient oceans teemed with life. Vast forests locked away carbon. Reefs stretched across shallow seas. None of this required human management. In fact, it functioned precisely because no species attempted to control it all. When humans eventually appeared, they entered a world already shaped by countless prior successes and failures. The oxygen in our lungs, the minerals in our bones, the soil beneath our feet, all are products of life that lived and died long before we arrived. Earth did not pause its work to accommodate us. We inherited conditions created by others. This inheritance is easy to overlook because we experience the planet as a backdrop rather than a process. Mountains feel permanent. Oceans feel eternal. But both are temporary expressions of deeper forces. Mountains rise and erode. Oceans open and close. Even continents rearrange themselves slowly but relentlessly. Life has always responded to these movements rather than directing them. When land bridges formed, species migrated. When they vanished, populations were isolated. Evolution followed the opportunities and constraints imposed by geology, not intention. Earth set the stage, but it did not write scripts. This becomes clearer when you consider how little of Earth's history includes creatures capable of reflection at all. Consciousness, as we understand it, is a late arrival. For most of the planet's existence, thriving had nothing to do with awareness. It depended on replication, variation, and survival within changing limits. Even intelligence, when it appears, is not inherently advantageous in all contexts. Many of the most enduring life forms on Earth are simple: bacteria, algae, fungi. They persist because they require little, adapt quickly, and tolerate extremes. Complexity often comes with fragility. Brains consume energy. Large bodies need stable resources. Social structures can collapse. From this view, humans are not the pinnacle of Earth's success. We are one of its riskier experiments. Our survival depends on narrow conditions and constant maintenance. We thrive when systems are stable, yet Earth rarely remains so for long. That does not diminish human achievement. It contextualizes it. The tools, cultures and technologies we've built are responses to a planet that does not naturally align with our needs. Fire, shelter, agriculture, medicine. These are not signs of a welcoming environment. They are signs of adaptation. It is also worth remembering how recently humans became a significant force at all. For most of our existence, we lived as small populations vulnerable to climate shifts, disease, and competition. A prolonged drought or a colder period could erase entire groups. Thriving was local, temporary, and uncertain. Only in the last few thousand years have humans begun to reshape the planet at scale. And even then, this influence is uneven. Earth continues to operate according to its own rules, sometimes amplifying our actions, sometimes overwhelming them. Volcanoes still erupt, earthquakes still strike. Storm systems still form independent of human plans. The idea that Earth thrived long before us challenges the assumption that the planet needs us to function. It doesn't. Life existed without us, and will likely continue in some form without us. That realization can feel unsettling, but it can also be clarifying. It reminds us that we are participants, not caretakers of the entire system. This does not mean humans have no responsibility. On the contrary, it means our actions matter because we are capable of altering conditions faster than many systems can adapt. But responsibility arises from power, not from centrality. We matter because we can cause change, not because the planet depends on us for meaning. When you let this settle, it becomes easier to see Earth as something active rather than accommodating. The planet is not waiting to see what humans will do next. It is continuing its cycles regardless, absorbing impacts, redistributing energy, and adjusting in ways that may or may not favour our continued presence. This perspective invites a different kind of humility. Not the kind that diminishes human worth, but the kind that recognises scale. Earth's timeline dwarfs ours. Its processes exceed our control. Thriving in this context becomes less about dominance and more about alignment. As you rest and listen, you are part of a long lineage of life forms that existed briefly within conditions they did not choose. Your body carries the imprint of ancient environments. Your cells still operate according to rules established long before language or culture. Even now, as your thoughts slow, those systems continue their work without instruction. Earth thrived long before humans because thriving was never about us. It was about interaction, energy moving through matter, life responding to opportunity, systems forming, dissolving and reforming. Humans arrived within that flow, not at its centre. One of the easiest ways to see that Earth was never calibrated specifically for humans is to pay attention to how narrow the margins are that keep us alive. We often think of breathing, standing, and moving as natural states, as if they are defaults that require no special conditions. But each of these depends on balances that are surprisingly delicate. The air you inhale, the force holding you against the ground, the pressure inside your body, all of it sits within tight ranges that Earth does not actively maintain for your benefit. Take breathing, for example. Oxygen feels abundant, invisible, effortless. You don't have to think about it. Your body handles it automatically, drawing air in and pushing it back out again over and over even as you sleep. But oxygen is not a given on Earth. For most of the planet's history, it was either absent or present in forms that would be lethal to us. The current concentration, roughly 21%, is not a target the planet aims for. It is a temporary outcome of biological activity layered on top of geological processes. Shift that percentage slightly, and things begin to fail. Too little oxygen, and cells starve. Too much, and the risk of uncontrolled combustion rises, making fires easier to start and harder to stop. Human lungs evolved to function within a narrow band, and that band exists only because photosynthetic organisms continue to produce oxygen at roughly the same rate that other processes consume it. This balance has drifted before, and it can drift again. Even now, breathing becomes difficult at higher elevations. The air doesn't disappear, but the pressure drops. Fewer oxygen molecules are available with each breath. Your body responds by breathing faster, increasing heart rate, producing more red blood cells. Some people adapt better than others, some never fully adjust. Earth does not flatten its mountains or thicken the air to help us. It simply presents conditions, and bodies either cope or they don't. Gravity is another force we treat as background noise. It's always there, pulling everything toward the center of the planet. It feels constant, reliable, invisible. But gravity is not tuned for comfort. It is simply the result of Earth's mass. Your bones, muscles, and circulatory system work continuously to counteract it. Blood has to be pumped upward against gravity to reach your brain. Over time, joints wear down, spines compress. Standing upright is not effortless. It is managed. If gravity were slightly stronger, movement would become more difficult. Circulation would strain. Falls would be more dangerous. If it were weaker, muscles and bones would weaken without constant use. Astronauts experience this firsthand in microgravity. Their bodies lose bone density, muscle mass, and fluid distribution shifts upward, causing swelling and vision problems. Human bodies are adapted to a specific gravitational range, and Earth happens to fall within it. Not because it was chosen, but because it is what it is. Pressure, too, plays a quiet role. Atmospheric pressure keeps liquids from boiling at body temperature. It allows gases to dissolve into blood in predictable ways. Change that pressure, and problems arise quickly. At high altitudes, lower pressure contributes to altitude sickness. At great depths underwater, increased pressure affects breathing gases. Nitrogen dissolves into tissues, and rapid changes can cause decompression sickness. These are not edge cases. They're reminders that our bodies function only within certain physical boundaries. Temperature is perhaps the most obvious margin. Human bodies maintain a narrow internal range. A few degrees too high or too low, and systems begin to fail. Proteins denature. Enzymes slow or stop. Organs lose coordination. Earth's surface temperature varies widely, far beyond what unprotected humans can tolerate. We rely on clothing, shelter, fire, and technology to extend our survivable range. Even within mild climates, temperature fluctuates daily and seasonally. Heat waves and cold snaps regularly push conditions toward dangerous extremes. Earth does not smooth these fluctuations. It produces them through solar input, atmospheric circulation, ocean currents, and land features. We adapt locally, temporarily, often with difficulty. Sunlight itself is another narrow margin. The sun provides energy that drives weather, photosynthesis, and climate, but it also emits radiation that damages cells and DNA. Earth's magnetic field and atmosphere deflect and absorb much of this radiation, but not because humans require protection. These features arise from the planet's molten core and chemical composition. They have weakened and strengthened over time. When they weaken, more radiation reaches the surface, affecting all life, not selectively sparing us. Even water, which seems abundant and essential, exists within constraints. Humans need fresh water, not salt water. Yet most of Earth's water is saline. Fresh water is unevenly distributed, often locked in ice or underground. Droughts occur not because Earth withholds water, but because climate patterns shift. Floods occur for the same reason. Access to water is a logistical challenge, not a guaranteed feature of the planet. Consider how easily these margins are crossed. A storm disrupts power, and heating fails. A heat wave overwhelms cooling systems. Pollution alters air quality. A volcanic eruption injects particles into the atmosphere, cooling the climate. None of these require malicious intent. They follow from physical interactions. Humans experience them as crises because our tolerances are narrow. It's tempting to interpret these vulnerabilities as flaws, but they are simply characteristics of how we evolved. Human bodies are the product of adaptation to specific past environments, not future-proof designs. Evolution works with what exists. It does not anticipate change. It produces organisms that survive well enough under current conditions, not perfectly under all conditions. This explains why so much of human progress involves building buffers. Houses buffer temperature, clothing buffers exposure, agriculture buffers food availability, medicine buffers disease, technology buffers almost everything. These buffers allow us to live in places and conditions that would otherwise be lethal. But they also create dependence. When buffers fail, the underlying margins reassert themselves. Earth does not adjust its systems to preserve those buffers. It does not pause storms for infrastructure. It does not regulate solar output to match our needs. It does not stabilize tectonic plates to protect cities. The planet continues its processes, and human systems either adapt or suffer damage. This is not a critique of Earth. It is an acknowledgement of scale. The forces shaping the planet operate on timescales and magnitudes that do not align with human planning. Gravity does not weaken because joints ache. Atmospheric chemistry does not stabilize because lungs are sensitive. These forces are not responsive. Understanding this changes how we interpret safety. Safety on Earth is not a default state. It is an achieved condition. It exists when natural margins and human adaptations overlap successfully, and it disappears when that overlap breaks down. This is why safety varies so much across geography and time. It also explains why humans experience anxiety so readily. We are highly sensitive organisms living within tight limits, in a world that does not promise stability. Our nervous systems evolved to detect threats quickly, because crossing those margins often meant death. Modern life disguises many of those dangers, but the underlying sensitivity remains. As you lie or sit listening, your body is performing countless adjustments to stay within those margins. Breathing maintains gas exchange. Circulation manages pressure. Temperature regulation balances heat production and loss. Muscles maintain posture against gravity. None of this stops simply because you are resting. The planet does not soften while you sleep. Yet this constant effort does not need to feel alarming. It can feel grounding instead. It reminds you that being alive is an active state, not a passive one. Life persists not because conditions are ideal, but because systems respond continuously to what is present. The narrowness of these margins also reveals something important about human presence on Earth. We are not broadly compatible with the planet. We are locally compatible. Small changes matter enormously to us. Earth accommodates far greater variation than we can tolerate. This perspective helps explain why climate shifts are so disruptive to human societies. Even modest changes in average temperature or precipitation patterns can destabilize food systems, water supplies, and health. Earth has experienced far larger changes before. Life adapted. Humans may or may not. None of this suggests inevitability. It suggests awareness. The planet does not owe us breathable air, manageable gravity, or tolerable temperatures. These conditions exist now, and they require careful interaction to maintain locally. When we ignore how narrow the margins are, we mistake coincidence for design. Once you start paying attention to how narrow the margins are that keep humans alive, another realization naturally follows. Earth is not tuned against life. On the contrary, life is everywhere here, persistent, adaptable, and astonishingly diverse. What Earth is not tuned for is any single species in particular, especially not one as demanding as humans. Life on this planet does not exist because conditions are gentle. It exists because certain forms of chemistry, energy flow, and replication happen to work together under a wide range of circumstances. Earth supports life not by providing comfort, but by allowing processes to continue long enough for adaptation to occur. The result is a planet that is biologically rich, yet selectively unforgiving. From bacteria in deep rock layers to plants growing through cracks in concrete, life fills available space wherever it can. But what counts as available depends entirely on the organism. Conditions that are deadly to us are ideal for others: high acidity, extreme heat, crushing pressure, toxic chemicals. These environments are not exceptions. They are large portions of the planet. Consider the deep ocean, which covers more than half of Earth's surface. Sunlight never reaches much of it. Temperatures are near freezing. Pressure increases with depth until it becomes difficult to even conceptualize. And yet, life thrives there. Fish with antifreeze proteins, creatures with bodies adapted to immense pressure, entire ecosystems clustered around hydrothermal vents, powered not by sunlight, but by chemical energy from the Earth's interior. None of these systems were waiting for humans. None depend on us. In fact, our presence in such environments usually requires layers of technology and careful planning. Submersibles, pressurized suits, oxygen tanks. Even then, our visits are brief and risky. Earth did not restrict life to places we find accessible. Life followed opportunity wherever it appeared. The same is true on land. Life flourishes in deserts where water is scarce and temperatures swing wildly. It persists in polar regions where sunlight disappears for months. It survives in soils saturated with heavy metals and in air thick with sulfur. Plants, fungi, insects, and microorganisms evolve strategies that allow them to function under conditions humans could not endure unaided. This tells us something important. Earth systems are flexible, but not in a human-centered way. The planet does not maintain conditions optimal for intelligence, longevity, or comfort. It maintains conditions that allow energy to flow and matter to cycle. Life takes advantage of that flow in countless forms, most of which do not resemble us and do not need what we need. Photosynthesis is a good example. It is one of the most important processes on Earth, forming the base of most food webs. It converts sunlight into chemical energy. But photosynthesis does not exist to feed humans. It exists because certain molecules can capture photons and store energy efficiently. Plants produce oxygen and carbohydrates as byproducts of this process, not as gifts. The fact that humans depend on photosynthesis does not make us its intended beneficiaries. We are secondary users of a system that evolved for reasons unrelated to us. When forests grow, they are not producing oxygen because we require it. They are following biochemical rules that happen to produce oxygen as a consequence. This distinction matters because it shifts how we interpret stability. Humans often assume that because Earth supports life broadly, it will continue to support human civilization specifically. But life as a whole is far more resilient than any particular species or social structure. Earth can remain alive while becoming uninhabitable to us. The fossil record makes this clear. Many past periods supported abundant life, yet would be disastrous for modern humans. High carbon dioxide levels, low oxygen, extreme heat. These conditions did not sterilize the planet. They changed which organisms could survive. Life continued, just differently. Even mass extinctions, which sound like total collapse, never eliminated life entirely. They reshaped ecosystems. They removed dominant species and opened space for others. From Earth's perspective, these were transitions, not failures. The system adjusted and moved on. Humans, however, are poorly equipped to weather such transitions without suffering. Our societies depend on predictable seasons, stable coastlines, consistent freshwater access, and narrow temperature ranges. When those shift, even slightly, consequences ripple outward quickly. Agriculture fails, infrastructure strains, health declines. This mismatch highlights the central idea. Earth is tuned for life, but not for maintaining the conditions humans prefer. The planet does not regulate itself to preserve civilizations. It responds to physical and biological feedback loops that operate independently of human values. It's easy to confuse habitability with friendliness. Earth is habitable in the sense that life exists here. But habitability is not uniform. It is patchy, temporary and contingent. Regions that support dense human populations do so because multiple variables align simultaneously. Climate, water, soil, disease pressure. Shift one variable and the balance changes. Human history is full of examples. Civilizations rose in fertile regions and declined when conditions shifted. Rivers changed course, rain patterns altered, soil degraded. These were not moral judgments by the planet. They were outcomes of interacting systems. What makes humans unusual is not that we are fragile, but that we are aware of our fragility. We notice when conditions become uncomfortable or dangerous. We assign meaning to those experiences. We build narratives around them. Other species simply adapt, migrate, or die without commentary. This awareness can create the illusion that Earth is somehow in conversation with us, responding to our actions or intentions. But the planet does not negotiate. It reacts according to physics and biology. When we alter atmospheric composition, temperatures change. When we remove forests, water cycles shift. These are not punishments, they are consequences. Recognizing that Earth is tuned for life broadly, rather than humans specifically, encourages a more accurate understanding of our role. We are not managers of a system designed to serve us. We are participants within a system that tolerates us under certain conditions. This understanding also reframes the idea of balance. People often talk about maintaining balance with nature, as if there is a stable ideal state to return to. In reality, Earth is always in motion. Balance exists only momentarily, as forces counteract each other temporarily before shifting again. Life persists not because balance is maintained, but because organisms adapt quickly enough to moving targets. Humans have extended their adaptability through culture and technology, but that adaptability still depends on underlying planetary conditions. As you rest, you might notice how stillness feels comforting. A quiet room, a stable temperature, predictable surroundings. These conditions are rare at planetary scale. They are curated, maintained, protected. Outside those boundaries, variability dominates. This does not mean Earth is hostile to us personally. It means indifference is the default. The planet does not privilege any one outcome. It allows many possibilities, most of which do not include humans thriving. Understanding this can feel unsettling at first, but it also clarifies what responsibility looks like. If Earth does not exist to support us automatically, then sustaining human life becomes an active project, one that requires understanding limits rather than assuming generosity. Life will continue on Earth in some form regardless of what humans do. The question is not whether life will survive, but whether our particular way of life will. That distinction matters. It shifts focus from saving the planet to understanding how we fit within it. This line of thinking carries forward naturally into how evolution operates without foresight or preference, shaping bodies and behaviours that work for now, not forever. Humans are no exception to this rule. We are products of adaptation, not destinations of design. Once you start to look at Earth without assuming comfort as the baseline, the pattern becomes hard to ignore. Extremes are not rare exceptions scattered around an otherwise gentle planet. They are the dominant condition. Comfort, at least the kind humans require to function easily, appears only in narrow pockets for limited periods of time, under specific circumstances. Most of the world exists outside those pockets, operating at temperatures, pressures, chemical balances and energy levels that push human bodies past their limits almost immediately. This becomes clear when you simply take a slow tour across the planet in your mind. Begin at the poles. where months pass without sunlight and temperatures drop low enough to freeze exposed skin in minutes. The cold is not occasional there, it is structural. Ice sheets kilometres thick grind slowly across the land. Winds cut across open terrain without obstruction. Life exists, but it is specialised, sparse, and efficient. Humans, without extensive preparation and support, do not last long. Move slightly south or north from those regions and you encounter tundra, where the ground remains frozen beneath a thin active layer that softens briefly each year. Buildings sink and tilt as permafrost thaws and refreezes. Vegetation grows low and slow. Food chains are fragile. These environments are not broken versions of something better. They are stable outcomes of Earth's climate system. They simply do not align with human preferences, shift further into temperate zones, and conditions become more forgiving, but only temporarily and unevenly. Seasonal swings bring heat and cold, storms and droughts. Rivers flood and retreat. Forests burn. None of this is malfunction. It is circulation. Energy moves through the system, and landscapes respond. Even here, comfort depends on timing. A mild climate one century can become unpredictable the next. Regions that once supported agriculture may no longer do so without intervention. What feels normal is often just what you happen to be adapted to at the moment. Continue toward the equator, and the challenge reverses. Heat becomes relentless. Humidity limits the body's ability to cool itself. Sweat stops evaporating effectively. The risk is not dehydration alone, but overheating from within. Human physiology struggles in sustained high heat, especially when combined with physical labour. Many equatorial regions are rich with life, yet exhausting or dangerous for unprotected humans. Deserts present another version of the same story. Vast stretches of land receive little rainfall for years or decades at a time. Temperatures swing sharply between day and night. Water is scarce and unpredictable. Life persists through extreme efficiency and dormancy. Humans require planning, storage, and technology to survive even briefly. Mountains add altitude to the equation. As elevation increases, air pressure drops. Oxygen becomes less available. Weather changes quickly. UV radiation intensifies. What looks serene from a distance becomes taxing up close. Permanent human settlements at high altitude exist, but only because populations have adapted slowly and built systems to compensate for the stress. Then there are the oceans, covering most of the planet, shaping climate, cycling heat, and sustaining enormous ecosystems. For humans, they are barriers. We cannot drink their water. We cannot breathe their air. We cannot tolerate their pressures or temperatures without elaborate equipment. Earth's dominant environment is fundamentally incompatible with unassisted human life. Even within places humans occupy comfortably, danger is never far. Earthquakes strike without warning, volcanoes erupt, storm systems form rapidly, lightning ignites fires, landslides reshape terrain. These events are not anomalies, they are expressions of internal and external energy flows. What's striking is not that Earth produces extremes, but that we are surprised when they intrude into our lives. This surprise often comes from forgetting how narrow the band of comfort really is. We build cities where conditions are favourable, then extend them outward, assuming stability will follow. Sometimes it does, for a while. Sometimes it doesn't. Human comfort depends on buffering extremes rather than eliminating them. Walls hold out wind. Insulation slows heat transfer. Air conditioning moves heat elsewhere. Heating concentrates energy locally. These systems create the impression that the world is manageable, but they function only as long as energy flows and infrastructure holds. When those systems fail, extremes reassert themselves quickly. A power outage during a heat wave becomes dangerous within hours. A winter storm can immobilize a city not designed for cold. Floodwaters overwhelm drainage. Fire spreads beyond containment. The underlying conditions never left. They were merely held at bay. Earth does not prioritize moderation. It distributes energy unevenly. Solar radiation varies by latitude, season, and atmospheric conditions. Ocean currents transport heat unpredictably. Tectonic forces release energy intermittently. Life adapts to these realities rather than smoothing them out. Most species thrive precisely because they specialize. They fit narrow niches within extreme conditions. Polar bears rely on cold. Desert plants rely on drought. Extremophils rely on chemical environments lethal to most life. Humans, by contrast, attempt to generalize. We aim to live everywhere, smoothing conditions rather than adapting biologically. This strategy has worked remarkably well so far, but it comes with trade-offs. Our bodies remain poorly suited to extremes. We rely on constant energy input to maintain comfort. When energy becomes scarce or disrupted, vulnerability increases quickly. Comfort in this sense is not a natural state. It is an engineered one. It requires continuous effort, materials, and coordination. Earth provides raw inputs, but not the finished environment. We assemble livability ourselves piece by piece. This helps explain why so much human anxiety is tied to stability. We crave predictability because unpredictability exposes how dependent we are on narrow conditions. Weather forecasts, climate models, disaster preparedness plans. These are not signs of paranoia. They are acknowledgements of fragility. Even sleep, the state you may be drifting toward now, depends on comfort. Temperature must be within range. Noise must be limited. Safety must be assumed. These conditions are rare in the wild and must often be constructed deliberately. Earth does not provide quiet by default. Wind moves, animals vocalize, water flows, insects buzz. The planet is active even when humans rest. Silence is another engineered state. This constant activity is not hostile. It is simply energetic. Earth dissipates heat from the sun. It releases pressure from within. It cycles matter endlessly. These processes generate variation, not consistency. When people speak nostalgically about a gentler Earth, they are often referring to specific moments or places, not the planet as a whole. The Earth of memory is selective. It excludes disasters, extremes, and long stretches of difficulty. It remembers comfort because comfort leaves space for memory to form. In reality, Earth has always been a place of sharp contrasts. Regions of abundance sit beside regions of scarcity. Periods of calm follow periods of disruption. No state lasts indefinitely. Recognizing this does not require fear. It invites realism. Comfort exists, but it is local, temporary, and maintained. When it appears, it is worth appreciating precisely because it is not guaranteed. As you continue to listen, you might notice how your own comfort depends on conditions beyond your control. The stability of the building, the reliability of energy systems, the predictability of weather outside. All of these factors align momentarily to allow rest. Earth does not stop producing extremes while you rest. They continue elsewhere, constantly. Storms form over oceans. Plates shift beneath continents. Heat accumulates. Cold radiates into space. The planet never settles into uniform calm. This ongoing contrast sets the stage for understanding how humans came to see themselves as separate from nature rather than embedded within it. When comfort is rare and effortful, it can feel artificial, detached from the world outside. That separation shapes how we think, build, and plan. And yet, despite the extremes, humans persist. We adjust schedules, we migrate, we innovate, we learn. Not because Earth makes it easy, but because life here has always been about navigating variability. That navigation does not end. It continues quietly, even now as conditions shift and systems respond. Comfort remains an island within a sea of extremes, sustained moment by moment as the planet continues moving forward without pause, setting the conditions for whatever adaptations come next. Once you accept that comfort is rare and extremes are common, the logic of evolution becomes easier to see without romantic filters. Evolution does not aim for balance, fairness, or long-term security. It does not anticipate future needs or correct past mistakes. It operates moment by moment, responding only to what exists right now. And what exists right now is rarely aligned with what humans would prefer. Evolution is often described as clever, creative, or even wise, but those are human interpretations layered onto a process that is fundamentally indifferent. It does not care which traits are pleasant, which are painful, or which feel meaningful. It does not work toward happiness or health. It simply filters variation through survival and reproduction under current conditions. If something works well enough for long enough, it persists. If it doesn't, it disappears. From that perspective, human needs are irrelevant unless they intersect directly with survival and reproduction. Comfort, meaning, longevity, and safety are not criteria. They are side effects at best. This is why so many aspects of the human body feel poorly designed, because design implies intention, and evolution has none. Take the human spine. It evolved from a structure originally suited for horizontal movement. When our ancestors began walking upright, that spine was repurposed rather than rebuilt. The result is a column under constant stress, prone to compression, herniation, and chronic pain. Evolution did not redesign the spine for upright life. It modified what was already there just enough to function. The same is true for knees, hips, and feet. These joints manage forces they were never optimized to handle over long lifespans. Pain and degeneration are common, not because something went wrong, but because evolution only required that individuals survive long enough to reproduce. What happens afterward is largely irrelevant to the process. Breathing and eating share a passage in the human throat, creating a constant choking risk. This arrangement persists because it developed incrementally from earlier structures and works well enough most of the time. Evolution did not separate air and food pathways for safety. It tolerated a risk because the alternative required changes that were never selected for. The human eye contains a blind spot where nerves pass through the retina, because the wiring is arranged backward compared to an ideal optical system. This configuration arose early and stuck. Evolution does not scrap functional systems to build better ones. It adds layers, reroutes, and patches. Childbirth in humans is unusually dangerous compared to many other mammals. Upright walking narrowed the pelvis. Larger brains increased head size. Evolution balanced these competing pressures imperfectly. The result is a process that frequently requires assistance and can be fatal without it. This is not an oversight. It is a compromise that worked well enough. These examples are not exceptions. They are the rule. Human bodies are full of trade-offs, vulnerabilities, and inefficiencies because evolution responds to immediate pressures, not future well-being. If a trait increases reproductive success even slightly, it can spread, regardless of long-term cost. This indifference becomes even clearer when you consider disease. Many illnesses are not failures of the body, but consequences of evolutionary priorities. The immune system reacts aggressively because underreacting was often fatal. Autoimmune conditions arise because the system errs on the side of attack. Anxiety exists because vigilance once improved survival odds. Depression may persist because the underlying mechanisms serve other functions. Evolution does not eliminate suffering. It tolerates it as long as reproduction continues. From the process's perspective, discomfort, pain, and fear are acceptable costs. This applies not just to bodies, but to behavior. Humans are prone to overconsume sugar and fat because those resources were once scarce. Evolution selected for cravings that encouraged intake when possible. In a modern environment of abundance, those same drives lead to health problems. Evolution does not update itself to match new contexts quickly. It lags behind change. Social behaviors follow similar patterns. Humans evolved in small groups. Our brains are attuned to face-to-face interaction, immediate feedback and local consequences. Large-scale societies, global communication, and abstract systems exceed what those instincts were built for. Stress, misinformation, conflict, and overload follow naturally. None of this suggests that humans are flawed versions of something better. It suggests that evolution never aimed for perfection. It aimed for continuity. Traits persist because they worked in past environments, not because they are optimal in present ones. Earth does not intervene to correct these mismatches. The planet does not slow environmental change to give biology time to adapt. When conditions shift faster than evolution can respond, extinction follows. This has happened repeatedly throughout Earth's history. Humans are not exempt from this pattern. Our intelligence and technology give us tools to respond faster than biology alone would allow, but they do not change the underlying logic. If our adaptations fail to keep pace with environmental change, evolutionary indifference applies to us as it has to every other species. It's important to recognize how deeply this indifference shapes the idea that Earth was not meant for humans. A planet designed for a species would likely minimize systemic suffering, reduce unnecessary risks, and align biological traits with environmental conditions. Earth does none of these things. It allows processes to unfold without regard to outcome. This realization can be unsettling, especially in cultures that emphasize purpose and destiny. But it can also be clarifying. It removes the expectation that the world should make sense in human terms. Pain is not a signal that something has gone wrong cosmically. It is often a consequence of living within constraints shaped by indifferent processes. Even longevity, something humans value deeply, is not prioritized by evolution. Many organisms reproduce once and die shortly after. Others live long lives because their environments allow it, not because longevity is inherently favored. Human lifespan has increased largely through cultural and technological means, not biological redesign. This is why modern medicine feels so disconnected from nature. It actively works against evolutionary outcomes. It preserves lives that evolution would not. It alleviates pain that evolution tolerates. It extends survival beyond reproductive years. From an evolutionary standpoint, much of medicine is irrelevant. From a human standpoint, it is essential. That tension exists because evolution does not care about individual experience. It tracks populations, not persons. Humans, however, care deeply about individuals. This difference creates friction between how the planet operates and how we wish it would operate. As you rest and listen, your body carries all of these evolutionary compromises quietly. Your breathing system works despite its risks. Your joints support you despite their wear. Your nervous system reacts quickly, sometimes too quickly, to perceived threats. None of this requires conscious effort. It is simply how the system runs. Earth does not notice these struggles. It does not adjust its climate or terrain to reduce strain. It continues cycling energy and matter, regardless of whether organisms find those conditions manageable. Understanding evolution's indifference does not require pessimism. It requires accuracy. It allows you to see that survival here has never been about being favoured. It has been about fitting temporarily into moving constraints. Instead of easing into this idea gently, it helps to approach it from a practical angle. Look at the human body not as a symbol or a miracle, but as a physical object interacting with a planet that was never obligated to accommodate it. Every day, without exception, your body negotiates with Earth. It presses against surfaces, it exchanges gases with the air, it absorbs energy, sheds heat, and resists forces that would otherwise pull it apart or wear it down. None of this is seamless. None of it is guaranteed. Human bodies are not native hardware perfectly matched to their environment. They are borrowed solutions, shaped under older conditions, operating in a world that frequently pushes back. Start with skin, the most obvious interface between body and planet. Human skin is thin compared to that of many other mammals. It provides limited insulation. It offers modest protection against injury. It burns easily under sunlight. It dries out in low humidity. It loses heat quickly in cold air and struggles to cool efficiently in high humidity. Other animals carry fur, blubber, scales, feathers, shells. Humans rely heavily on external coverings because our skin alone does not hold up well against Earth's variability. This is not accidental. Human ancestors evolved in relatively stable climates where external protection could be improvised. Once clothing, shelter, and fire became reliable, there was no evolutionary pressure to thicken skin or grow dense fur. The body outsourced protection to tools. That decision worked well enough to persist, but it came with a cost. Remove those tools and vulnerability becomes immediate. Muscle and bone tell a similar story. Human skeletons are optimized for endurance walking, not impact resistance. Our bones are light enough to allow efficient movement, but that lightness makes them prone to fracture. Our muscles fatigue easily under sustained strain. We cannot sprint for long, climb effortlessly, or absorb falls without injury. Many animals do these things far better because their bodies evolved under different pressures. Gravity never stops testing this system. Every step compresses joints. Every year adds cumulative stress. Knees wear down, hips erode, spinal discs flatten. Pain becomes common not because something has failed, but because the design tolerates degradation as long as reproduction occurs earlier in life. Earth's gravity does not adjust to preserve joint health. It applies the same force relentlessly. Circulation is another constant negotiation. Blood must be pumped upward against gravity to reach the brain. Valves prevent backflow. Muscles assist venous return. When these systems weaken, dizziness, swelling, and fatigue follow. Standing still for long periods becomes uncomfortable because the body must actively fight gravity just to maintain blood distribution. Respiration adds further complexity. Lungs evolved to process air at certain pressures and compositions. Changes in altitude, pollution, smoke, or humidity interfere quickly. Airborne particles irritate tissue. Chemical imbalances disrupt oxygen exchange. The planet does not filter air for human lungs. We build filters instead. Temperature regulation is one of the clearest examples of resistance. Human bodies generate heat constantly and must release excess heat to avoid overheating. Sweating is effective only under specific conditions. High humidity limits evaporation. Cold environments overwhelm heat production. Wind strips warmth away. Sun adds heat faster than it can be shed. Clothing, buildings, and climate control compensate, but the body itself operates close to failure points. Digestion reveals another mismatch. Humans are omnivores with relatively inefficient digestive tracts compared to specialized animals. We cannot extract nutrients from cellulose without processing. We require cooking to increase caloric yield from food. Raw diets limit energy availability. Our teeth wear down. Our guts are sensitive to pathogens. Earth offers abundant biomass, but not all of it is accessible to us without modification. Water balance is equally fragile. Humans cannot drink seawater. We cannot tolerate dehydration for long. Electrolyte imbalances disrupt nerve and muscle function. The body loses water continuously through breathing, sweating, and waste. Earth does not deliver fresh water evenly or predictably. Access depends on geography, climate, and infrastructure. Even reproduction reflects compromise. Human infants are born helpless compared to many other mammals. Large brains require early birth before skeletal development completes. The result is prolonged dependency. Childbirth is risky. Care requirements are high. None of this aligns with efficiency in a hostile environment. It aligns with a lineage that relied on social cooperation to offset biological limitations. Sleep itself illustrates resistance. Human sleep leaves us vulnerable. Reduced awareness, slower reaction times, lowered muscle tone. In many environments, sleeping unprotected is dangerous. We create secure spaces because the body cannot defend itself effectively while resting. Earth does not pause its hazards while we sleep. Disease highlights another layer. Pathogens evolve rapidly. Human immune systems respond imperfectly. Fever, inflammation, and pain are crude defense mechanisms. They work, but at a cost. Earth's ecosystems teem with microorganisms that do not recognize human boundaries. We're exposed constantly. Immunity is learned, partial, and temporary. The nervous system compounds this tension. Human brains are sensitive, energy-hungry, and easily overwhelmed. Sensory overload, chronic stress, and anxiety are common responses to environments filled with noise, movement, and uncertainty. The brain evolved to manage immediate threats, not persistent low-level stressors. Modern environments amplify this mismatch. None of these vulnerabilities imply failure. They reflect history. Human bodies were shaped under conditions that no longer exist consistently. Evolution does not update designs wholesale. It modifies existing structures incrementally. When environments change faster than bodies can adapt, strain increases. Earth does not slow down to allow biological catch-up. Climate shifts, landscapes change, ecosystems reorganize. Bodies must cope using whatever tools they already possess. For humans, those tools increasingly exist outside the body. Technology functions as an external physiology. Heating replaces fur. Glass replaces eyelids in harsh wind. Shoes replace toughened soles. Medicine replaces robust immunity. These extensions work remarkably well, but they require maintenance. When they fail, the body's limitations reappear immediately. This dependency reinforces the idea that humans live on borrowed terms. Our bodies are not fully compatible with the planet as it exists across most places and times. We survive by creating local conditions that temporarily align with our needs. That alignment is fragile. Infrastructure degrades. Resources fluctuate. Systems interact in unexpected ways. When buffers thin, Earth's resistance becomes apparent again, not as malice, but as persistence. There is a quiet honesty in acknowledging this. It removes the illusion that the planet owes us compatibility. It explains why survival here has always required effort, cooperation, and adaptation. As you continue listening, your own body rests within this negotiation. Gravity holds you down. Air moves in and out. Temperature stabilizes within a narrow band. Countless adjustments occur without conscious input. None of this is guaranteed beyond the moment it is happening. Bodies borrowed from a world that resists them must constantly adapt, repair, and compensate. That ongoing process does not conclude. It continues forward, shaping how humans relate to the planet, how societies organize protection, and how the next set of adaptations emerges in response to a world that remains active, indifferent, and very much itself. Rather than picturing nature as something that watches over us, it's more accurate to see it as something that simply runs. No supervision, no concern, no awareness of who benefits and who struggles. Earth operates as a system, or more precisely, as a vast collection of systems layered on top of one another, interacting constantly, adjusting automatically, and never pausing to check how those adjustments affect any particular species. When humans talk about nature caring, providing, or responding, we are projecting our own social instincts onto processes that do not have them. A system does not nurture, it does not warn, it does not adapt out of sympathy. It follows rules, and those rules produce outcomes. On Earth, those outcomes include life, death, abundance, scarcity, stability, and collapse, often all at once in different places. The same system that allows crops to grow also produces droughts. The same atmospheric circulation that brings rain can also generate hurricanes. None of this is contradictory. It is simply how large, complex systems behave. The caretaker idea is deeply appealing because it suggests safety. If nature is watching over us, then disruptions feel temporary, mistakes feel forgivable, and recovery feels inevitable. But Earth does not function like a caretaker. It does not restore balance because something was harmed. It does not intervene when thresholds are crossed. It shifts state when forces outweigh resistance, and the new state persists until conditions change again. This becomes clear when you look at ecological systems closely. Forests do not exist to clean air or provide shade. They exist because soil, water, sunlight and species interactions happen to align in a way that supports trees. When that alignment breaks, forests decline or disappear. Grasslands replace them. Deserts expand. Wetlands dry out or flood permanently. These changes are not corrections. They are transitions. Human language struggles with this because we instinctively assign agency. We say nature is angry, damaged, stressed, or healing. In reality, ecosystems do not experience stress. They experience change. Species respond according to their tolerances. Some flourish, others fail. The system reorganizes around whatever remains. This indifference can feel unsettling, especially when humans are affected directly. Floods displace communities. Fires destroy homes. Storms erase coastlines. It is tempting to interpret these events as betrayals, as if the world violated an implicit agreement. But no such agreement exists. The planet never committed to stability on human terms. Care implies intention. Systems have none. They operate through feedback loops. Positive feedback amplifies change. Negative feedback dampens it. Temperature influences ice cover. Ice cover influences reflectivity. Reflectivity influences temperature. These loops do not aim for comfort. They respond to energy balance. When humans alter one part of a system, other parts respond. Increase greenhouse gases and heat retention changes. Remove vegetation and water cycles shift. Introduce new species and food webs reorganize. The system does not judge these inputs, it incorporates them. This is why unintended consequences are so common. Humans intervene with specific goals, but systems respond holistically. A dam generates power but alters sediment flow, water temperature, and migration patterns. Pesticides reduce pests but affect pollinators and soil organisms. Urban development creates shelter but modifies heat distribution and rainfall patterns. Nature does not compensate for these changes to preserve prior conditions. It moves forward from wherever it is pushed. The idea that ecosystems will always bounce back assumes a caretaker mindset, one where restoration is automatic. In reality, systems settle into new configurations. Some are less compatible with human needs. This does not mean systems are fragile. Many are robust in ways humans underestimate. Life persists under extreme conditions. Microbial communities adapt quickly. But robustness does not equal reversibility. A system can be stable in a degraded state just as easily as in a productive one. Human societies often plan based on historical patterns, assuming tomorrow will resemble yesterday. Systems do not honour that assumption. Past behaviour does not guarantee future stability. Thresholds exist. When crossed, change accelerates. The caretaker myth also shapes how humans view responsibility. If nature is expected to take care of itself, then damage feels temporary. If the planet is resilient by default, then intervention feels optional. But a system does not repair itself for moral reasons. It reorganizes based on physics, chemistry, and biology. Understanding nature as a system clarifies why warnings often come too late. Systems can absorb stress quietly until a tipping point is reached. Then change appears sudden, even though the underlying process was gradual. Coral reefs bleach after sustained warming. Ice sheets destabilize after prolonged thinning. Fisheries collapse after years of over-extraction. From the inside, these shifts feel abrupt and shocking. From the system's perspective, they are expected outcomes once limits are exceeded. No alarm is sounded, no caretaker intervenes. This perspective also changes how we interpret balance. Balance is not a stable midpoint. It is a dynamic condition that exists only as long as opposing forces remain matched. Once inputs change, balance shifts. Systems do not resist change indefinitely. They respond. Human comfort often depends on stable balances, predictable rainfall, moderate temperatures, reliable seasons. These conditions are not guaranteed by the system. They are emergent properties that can dissolve when energy flows change. Seeing nature as a system rather than a caretaker also removes the idea of punishment. Drought is not retribution. Flooding is not a message. Disease outbreaks are not moral judgments. They are consequences of interactions between organisms and environments. This reframing can be strangely calming. It removes blame from the planet and places attention on understanding mechanisms. Instead of asking why something happened, the focus shifts to how it happened and what conditions allowed it. As you rest, systems continue operating around you. Atmospheric pressure shifts, moisture moves, heat redistributes, microorganisms metabolize. None of this pauses because humans are sleeping. None of it accelerates out of concern. The quiet stability you experience now is a local outcome of many systems aligning temporarily. Walls block wind, insulation slows heat loss, electrical grids maintain temperature, water flows through pipes. These are not natural guarantees. They are engineered alignments layered on top of indifferent processes. When those alignments fail, the underlying system reasserts itself. Cold enters, heat builds, water follows gravity. This is not cruelty, it is consistency. Understanding nature as a system also clarifies why coexistence requires effort. Caretakers adjust to needs. Systems require adaptation. Humans must study patterns, respect limits, and anticipate change. Expecting accommodation leads to surprise and loss. Expecting indifference leads to preparation. This mindset does not eliminate risk, but it changes posture. Instead of leaning on assumptions of stability, it encourages humility. Instead of seeking reassurance, it values awareness. Life on Earth continues not because someone is looking after it, but because systems allow it under certain conditions. Humans are part of those systems, not overseers of them. Our actions feed back into processes that respond without preference. It becomes easier to see why control is always partial and temporary. Systems are larger than any single influence. They incorporate change and move forward. Instead of thinking about survival as something that happens once and then stays settled, it makes more sense to see it as a conversation that never really ends. Not a conversation in words, but a constant back and forth between living bodies and the conditions surrounding them. On Earth, survival is not a box you check and move past. It is an ongoing negotiation, renewed every moment, whether you're aware of it or not. From the outside, human survival can look stable. Cities stand for decades. Farms produce food year after year. Roads, buildings, and networks give the impression that we have secured our place. But underneath that apparent stability, negotiation is happening continuously. Bodies adjust, systems respond, resources are exchanged, limits are tested. Nothing is permanently resolved. Every breath is part of that negotiation. Oxygen enters your lungs because the concentration in the air happens to be high enough, because pressure allows gas exchange, because your respiratory muscles function, because your blood chemistry is within range. If any of those conditions shift too far, breathing becomes difficult or impossible. Survival continues not because it is guaranteed, but because conditions currently align. Food works the same way. Eating is not simply consumption. It is a process of converting external matter into usable energy under strict constraints. Food must exist, it must be accessible, it must contain nutrients your body can process. It must be free enough of toxins and pathogens to avoid overwhelming your defenses. Each meal represents a successful negotiation between availability, preparation, biology, and environment. Water is even more unforgiving. Humans can survive weeks without food, but only days without water. That water must be fresh, not saline. It must be relatively clean. It must arrive at the right time. Too little leads to dehydration. Too much too quickly can be dangerous. The balance is narrow, and Earth does not manage it for us. Rivers flood or dry. Rain falls unevenly. Access depends on geography and infrastructure. Shelter adds another layer. Humans survive by creating microenvironments that soften Earth's extremes. Walls block wind. Roofs deflect rain. Insulation slows heat exchange. These structures negotiate on our behalf, but they are not permanent solutions. They degrade. They require materials. They depend on stable ground and predictable conditions. When those change, shelter must change too. Even rest, something that feels passive, is part of the negotiation. Sleep lowers awareness and mobility, making bodies vulnerable. To sleep safely, humans must create conditions of security. Doors, walls, social trust. In the absence of these, sleep fragments. Fatigue accumulates. Survival becomes harder. Earth does not provide safe places to sleep by default. They're arranged. Zooming out, entire societies operate within the same framework. Agriculture negotiates with climate, soil, pests, and water. Transportation negotiates with terrain and weather. Energy systems negotiate with resource availability and physical laws. When negotiations succeed, societies grow. When they fail, stress builds. What makes this negotiation feel invisible most of the time is repetition. When conditions remain similar from day to day, survival feels automatic. You wake up, you breathe, you eat, you rest. The effort recedes into the background. But repetition does not equal permanence. It only means the negotiation has not yet reached a breaking point. History is full of moments when those points were reached. Extended droughts disrupted food production. Cold periods shortened growing seasons. Floods erased settlements. Diseases spread faster than societies could respond. These were not failures of morality or intelligence. They were outcomes of negotiations turning unfavourable. Importantly, survival is negotiated not just with the physical environment, but with other life forms. Humans coexist with bacteria, viruses, fungi, plants, and animals, all pursuing their own survival. Pathogens exploit bodies as environments. Pests exploit crops. Predators exploit vulnerability. Competition is constant even when unnoticed. The immune system is a clear example of this. It is not a static defense, but a dynamic response system. It learns. It adapts. It sometimes overreacts. Fever, inflammation, fatigue. These are negotiation tactics, not guarantees. Sometimes the immune system wins, sometimes it doesn't. Earth does not intervene. Technology often gives the impression that humans have exited this negotiation. Antibiotics suppress infection. Machines regulate temperature. Supply chains deliver food regardless of season. But technology does not remove negotiation. It shifts it. New dependencies form. New vulnerabilities appear. Energy sources must be maintained. Systems must be synchronized. When disruptions occur, the negotiation becomes visible again. This is why collapse can feel sudden even when it isn't. Negotiations degrade quietly before they fail loudly. Soil fertility declines slowly. Infrastructure ages gradually. Climate patterns drift incrementally. When thresholds are crossed, survival becomes harder quickly, not because something new happened, but because accumulated strain exceeded capacity. On an individual level, aging makes this process obvious. Bodies that once negotiated easily begin to struggle. Recovery slows, balance falters, tolerance narrows, survival becomes more effortful. This is not punishment. It is the natural outcome of systems operating under wear and entropy. Earth does not reset conditions for fairness. It does not pause degradation. It does not compensate for loss. Negotiation continues regardless of outcome. Some bodies adapt, others don't. This perspective can change how success is understood. Survival is not proof of superiority. It is evidence of fit within current conditions. When conditions change, fit must be renegotiated. No species retains its position permanently. Humans sometimes frame survival as a conquest. We overcome nature, defeat disease, conquer environments. But conquest implies an end state. Negotiation implies continuity. There is no final victory, only ongoing adjustment. This is true even at planetary scale. Earth itself negotiates energy from the sun, heat loss to space, internal pressure from radioactive decay. Climate is the outcome of those negotiations. When inputs change, outputs change. There is no caretaker moderating the terms. Understanding survival this way can soften anxiety rather than amplify it. If survival were supposed to be settled once and for all, any threat would feel catastrophic. But if survival is always provisional, then challenge becomes expected rather than shocking. As you rest now, negotiation continues quietly. Your body adjusts posture. Temperature regulation fine-tunes itself. Breathing responds to carbon dioxide levels. None of this requires conscious effort, yet all of it is active. Outside your immediate space, other negotiations unfold. Weather systems redistribute heat. Plants exchange gases. Animals forage. Microbes metabolize. Earth hums with activity, not because it cares, but because systems operate continuously. Seeing survival as negotiation also reframes responsibility. Care is not about restoring a promised stability. It is about maintaining favourable terms for as long as possible. Attention, restraint, and adaptation matter because they influence negotiations, not because they guarantee outcomes. This understanding does not lead to resignation, it leads to realism. Humans have always survived by paying attention to limits, reading patterns, and adjusting behaviour. When those skills lapse, survival becomes more costly. The negotiation never ends. It pauses nowhere. It does not resolve neatly. It carries forward into every decision, every system, every body interacting with a planet that does not promise safety, but does allow possibility. Control is a comforting story to tell ourselves, especially when surrounded by machines that respond at the press of a button and systems that seem to bend to human intention. Lights turn on, water flows from taps, buildings rise where empty land once sat. From inside this constructed world, it can feel as though humans have moved beyond negotiation and into command. But that sense of dominance is fragile, maintained by layers of alignment that can shift far more easily than they appear. What exists instead is a hostile balance, one that tolerates our presence only as long as multiple conditions continue to line up, often in ways we do not fully see. Dominance implies authority. It suggests that outcomes are decided rather than influenced, that systems respond because they are compelled to. Earth does not respond that way. It does not yield. It absorbs, redirects, amplifies, or dampens inputs according to physical limits. When humans act at scale, the planet does not push back deliberately. It simply continues operating, and the results can look like resistance, only because our expectations were misplaced. The illusion of dominance grows strongest in environments that are heavily engineered. Cities feel solid. Roads feel permanent. Climate control creates predictable indoor worlds disconnected from weather outside. Food arrives on schedules. Waste disappears down drains. These layers insulate human experience from immediate consequences, making the planet's larger systems feel distant or irrelevant. But this insulation is not strength. It is dependency. Each layer relies on energy flows, material supply, maintenance, and stability beyond itself. Electricity depends on generation and transmission. Water depends on sources, treatment and pressure. Food depends on soil, climate, transport and labour. None of these systems function independently, and none are protected from disruption by virtue of human intention. Hostile balance means that stability exists not because the system favours us, but because opposing forces are temporarily matched. Gravity pulls continuously. Structures resist. Heat flows outward. Insulation slows it. Rain falls. Drainage redirects it. As long as resistance holds, things appear controlled. When resistance weakens, forces reassert themselves without hesitation. This is why failures cascade. A power outage affects heating, cooling, water, communication, and transportation simultaneously. A drought affects crops, prices, migration, and political stability. A storm damages infrastructure, disrupts supply chains, and exposes vulnerabilities that were always present but rarely visible. The balance is hostile not in the sense of malicious intent, but in its indifference to human convenience. It does not adjust itself gently. It shifts according to accumulated pressures. When thresholds are crossed, change accelerates. Human dominance narratives often rely on short time frames. Over decades, progress feels linear. Technology improves, lifespans increase, comfort expands, but Earth operates on longer cycles. Climate systems shift over centuries, geological processes unfold over millennia. When viewed at those scales, human control looks intermittent and localized rather than absolute. Consider how quickly landscapes reclaim abandoned structures. Roads crack, buildings decay, vegetation pushes through concrete, rust spreads. Given enough time, human constructions dissolve back into materials governed by weather, chemistry, and biology. The planet does not preserve what we build, it weathers it. Even our most durable achievements, metals, plastics, synthetic compounds, persist not because Earth protects them, but because they resist breakdown under current conditions. Change those conditions, and persistence changes too. Heat, pressure, ultraviolet radiation, and microbial action all work slowly, relentlessly. The idea of dominance also obscures how dependent human success is on cooperation with natural systems. Agriculture depends on pollinators, soil organisms, and predictable seasons. Fisheries depend on reproductive cycles and food webs. Forestry depends on growth rates and regeneration. When these systems are pushed too far, yields decline regardless of human effort. What makes the illusion convincing is scale. Humans can dominate locally for short periods. We can redirect rivers, level hills, and alter coastlines. These interventions feel decisive, but they are always temporary negotiations with forces that continue operating long after projects end. Large dams, for example, generate power and control water flow, but they also accumulate sediment, alter ecosystems, and strain materials. Over time, maintenance becomes more demanding. Without it, structures fail. The river does not negotiate. It flows according to gravity. Climate control offers another example. Indoor environments can be maintained within narrow temperature ranges regardless of outside conditions, but only while energy flows continuously. Interrupt that flow, and exterior extremes assert themselves quickly. Comfort vanishes not because nature attacks, but because balance collapses. This fragility is often mistaken for vulnerability caused by external threats, when it is actually a feature of complex systems operating near limits. Hostile balance does not allow complacency. It demands constant input to maintain favourable conditions. The language of dominance also shapes how humans respond to environmental stress. If we believe we're in control, warnings feel exaggerated. Feedback feels negotiable. Limits feel theoretical. By the time consequences become undeniable, options narrow. Nature does not escalate gradually for our convenience. It responds proportionally to inputs. Increase atmospheric heat retention, and energy accumulates. Alter land surfaces, and water cycles shift. These responses do not pause at socially acceptable thresholds. This is why the idea of a hostile balance is more accurate than opposition. The planet is not pushing against us. It is not defending itself. It is operating. Human systems exist within that operation, not above it. As you rest, the sense of safety you feel is a local success of balance. Walls resist gravity. Insulation resists temperature gradients. Social systems resist disorder. None of these are permanent. They are maintained states. Understanding this does not require abandoning technology or progress. It requires clarity about limits. Dominance implies freedom from consequence. Balance implies responsibility for maintaining alignment. Human history includes many moments where dominance was assumed and balance was ignored. Civilizations expanded agriculture into marginal lands, over-extracted resources, deforested watersheds, and disrupted local climates. Collapse followed not because nature punished them, but because balance failed. What replaces dominance is not submission, but attentiveness. Systems can be influenced, but not commanded. Outcomes can be shaped, but not guaranteed. Stability can be extended, but not locked in. The illusion of dominance is appealing because it simplifies uncertainty. It suggests that problems can always be solved through force or innovation. Hostile balance acknowledges that some problems arise because limits have been exceeded, not because solutions were insufficient. This awareness changes how survival is approached. Instead of assuming control, it emphasizes resilience. Instead of expansion without regard, it values margin. Instead of ignoring feedback, it listens to it early. Earth does not require humans to understand this to continue functioning. But human societies benefit from recognizing when confidence has outpaced reality. As this understanding settles, it becomes easier to see dominance as a temporary feeling rather than a permanent condition. One that arises when systems are aligned and fades when they are not. The balance remains indifferent and exacting, allowing human activity to persist only while conditions support it. That balance does not promise safety, but it does offer continuity for those willing to recognize its terms as the negotiation continues forward without pause. Machines are often described as tools that give humans power, but that framing misses something essential about what technology actually does. Technology does not place us above the planet or shield us from it completely. Instead, it translates. It takes forces that are otherwise overwhelming, invisible, or incompatible with human biology, and converts them into forms we can tolerate, predict, and use. In that sense, technology functions less like a weapon and more like an interpreter, standing between fragile bodies and a world that does not naturally speak our language. Earth expresses itself through pressure, heat, motion, chemistry, and energy flows that operate far outside human comfort ranges. Gravity pulls relentlessly. Temperature gradients move heat without pause. Gases diffuse. Water follows elevation. Radiation arrives continuously from the sun and beyond. Left untranslated, these forces impose strict limits on where and how humans can exist. Technology does not stop those forces. It reshapes how we encounter them. Consider shelter, one of the earliest technological responses. A simple roof does not eliminate rain. It redirects it. Walls do not remove wind. They interrupt its path. Fire does not cancel cold. It creates a localized counterbalance. Even the most basic structures translate environmental conditions into narrower ranges that human bodies can endure. As technology advances, this translation becomes more layered and abstract. Insulation slows heat transfer. Windows admit light while blocking wind. Climate control systems actively move energy to maintain desired temperatures. These systems do not override Earth's physics. They work by exploiting it, channeling energy along gradients in controlled ways. Electricity is another powerful example. Lightning is dangerous and unpredictable. Electrical grids capture energy from controlled sources and deliver it safely into homes and devices. This does not negate Earth's electrical forces, it repackages them into usable forms. When that packaging fails, the raw force becomes apparent again. Transportation translates terrain. Roads flatten landscapes. Bridges span gaps. Vehicles convert chemical energy into motion that overcomes distance and elevation. Yet terrain remains. Gravity still resists movement. Friction still generates heat. Engines still require fuel. Remove the technology, and the translation collapses. Food systems offer perhaps the clearest illustration. Plants grow according to soil, water, sunlight, and season. Humans use tools to alter those inputs. Plows reshape soil. Irrigation redistributes water. Fertilizers adjust nutrient availability. Refrigeration slows decay. Cooking changes chemical structure to make nutrients accessible. At every stage, technology translates biological processes into predictable food supply. None of this makes humans independent of Earth. It makes them dependent in new ways. Each translation layer introduces vulnerabilities. Power grids depend on fuel, infrastructure, and coordination. Water systems depend on treatment plants and pressure. Agricultural systems depend on climate stability and global transport. When translation fails, the underlying forces reappear abruptly. Medicine extends this pattern inward. Human bodies are not resilient enough to survive many injuries or infections unaided. Technology intervenes. Antibiotics translate microbial competition into manageable treatment. Surgery translates physical damage into repair. Imaging technologies translate internal processes into visible information. These tools do not eliminate disease or injury. They change how bodies interact with biological realities. The same applies to time. Earth operates on cycles that do not match human schedules. Day and night follow rotation. Seasons follow orbit. Weather follows atmospheric dynamics. Technology translates these rhythms into clocks, calendars, forecasts, and lighting that allow humans to function independently of immediate conditions. Artificial light turns night into working hours. Forecasting models turn chaotic systems into probabilities. This translation shapes perception. When technology works well, Earth feels stable and responsive. Heat arrives when requested. Water appears on demand. Distance shrinks. Danger feels distant. The planet's indifference fades into the background, replaced by interfaces that respond to human intention. But interfaces are not reality. They are layers. When they break, the underlying system reasserts itself quickly. A failed air conditioning system during extreme heat reveals how narrow human tolerance is. A disrupted supply chain exposes dependence on distant climates and resources. A medical shortage exposes biological fragility. This does not mean technology is a mistake. It means its role must be understood accurately. Technology does not dominate Earth. It negotiates with it. It translates raw forces into human-compatible forms for as long as conditions allow. This becomes especially clear when technology scales up. Large infrastructures alter energy flows at planetary scale. Fossil fuel extraction translates ancient stored energy into motion and heat, but also into atmospheric change. Industrial agriculture translates sunlight into calories efficiently, but also into soil depletion and ecosystem disruption. These translations feed back into the systems they depend on. Earth does not reject these changes, it incorporates them. Atmospheric chemistry shifts. Climate patterns respond. Ecosystems reorganize. Technology does not protect humans from those responses. It often amplifies them. The idea that technology will always save us relies on a misunderstanding of its function. Technology cannot rewrite physical limits. It can only work within them. When those limits are exceeded, translation becomes distortion, and systems destabilize. This is why redundancy and maintenance matter so much. Translation requires constant effort. interfaces degrade, materials fatigue, software fails, human error accumulates. Earth does not pause its processes while repairs are made. As you rest now, countless technologies around you are actively translating. Electrical systems maintain light and temperature. Structural systems hold gravity at bay. Digital systems route information invisibly. None of these are passive. They are dynamic responses to ongoing forces. The quiet of your environment depends on active mediation. Noise is absorbed. Motion is dampened. Temperature is regulated. These conditions feel natural only because translation has become habitual. Understanding technology as a translator rather than a shield reframes its role. It encourages humility rather than confidence. It highlights dependency rather than independence. It reminds us that behind every interface lies a force that does not respond to intention. This perspective also clarifies why technological solutions alone cannot guarantee safety. They must align with the systems they translate. When alignment fails, complexity increases risk rather than reducing it. Humans did not invent technology to escape Earth. They invented it to live on a planet that resists them. Every tool is a response to mismatch. Every system is an attempt to narrow margins that remain unforgiving. As the story continues, this translation role becomes even more significant. The more humans rely on technology to bridge gaps between biology and environment, the more critical it becomes to understand what is being translated, what is being ignored, and where limits still exist. The planet continues expressing itself through energy, motion, and change. Technology listens, converts, and relays, sometimes accurately, sometimes imperfectly, always temporarily, and within that ongoing exchange, human survival continues to depend not on dominance, but on how well the translation holds moment by moment as conditions keep shifting forward. Treating the planet as something we own is a habit that formed slowly, reinforced by centuries of expansion, mapping, dividing, and naming. Ownership feels practical. It implies control, responsibility, permanence. But if you step back and look at how briefly humans have been here, how provisional our settlements are, and how little the planet adjusts itself around our preferences, that language starts to feel misplaced. A more accurate frame is quieter and less flattering. We are guests, not owners, moving through a space that was active long before we arrived and will remain active long after we leave. A guest does not redesign the house to suit themselves completely. A guest learns where the floors creak, which doors stick, how the light shifts through the day. A guest adapts their behaviour to the structure they are visiting. Ownership assumes the opposite. It assumes the right to remodel without consequence, to extract without regard for long-term effects, to impose systems that prioritise comfort over compatibility. Earth responds very differently to those two approaches. When humans behave as owners, the planet does not acknowledge the claim. Rivers continue eroding regardless of property lines. Weather ignores borders. Ecosystems cross jurisdictions. Geological processes unfold without permits or approval. The concept of ownership exists entirely within human systems. Earth does not recognise it. This mismatch matters because ownership language shapes behaviour. Owners feel entitled to maximum use. Guests tend to be more observant. They notice limits. They recognise that staying depends on respecting conditions rather than redefining them. Historically, the ownership mindset has been effective in the short term. Land was cleared, resources were extracted, settlements expanded. For a time it looked like control. But control was always local and temporary. Soil depleted, water sources shifted, forests vanished, climate patterns changed. These outcomes were not failures of execution. They were consequences of treating a system as property rather than process. Guests do not expect permanence. They plan for departure even if it is far away. Owners often assume indefinite residence. That assumption influences how risk is calculated. Short-term gains feel reasonable when the future is assumed stable. When stability is not guaranteed, restraint becomes more rational. Earth's history supports the guest perspective. No species has ever held permanent tenure. Dominant organisms rise and fall, environments change, life reorganizes, even the most successful lineages eventually decline. Humans are not exempt from this pattern simply because we are aware of it. Seeing ourselves as guests does not diminish human importance, it contextualizes it. Guests still matter. Their actions still affect the space they occupy. Damage caused by guests still has consequences. But the relationship is framed around participation rather than entitlement. This framing also changes how responsibility is understood. Owners often feel responsible only for maintenance that benefits them. Guests feel responsible for not causing harm that outlasts their stay. That difference is subtle but powerful. Many traditional cultures operated closer to the guest model, even if they did not use that language. Seasonal movement, respect for ecological limits, rituals acknowledging dependence. These were not signs of ignorance. They were strategies aligned with the understanding that land does not belong to anyone permanently. Modern systems replace that understanding with permanence narratives, deeds, borders, extraction rights. These tools work well within human legal frameworks. They do not alter how Earth functions. When systems conflict, Earth's rules prevail. This becomes especially clear when environmental change forces movement. Rising seas displace coastal communities. Drought drives migration. Extreme heat alters habitability. Ownership claims dissolve quickly under those pressures. The land does not negotiate. It changes, and humans must respond. Guests adapt. Owners resist until resistance fails. Seeing ourselves as guests also clarifies why stewardship matters more than dominance. Stewardship is not about control. It is about care within limits. It recognizes that actions have ripple effects beyond immediate benefit. It values longevity of systems over short-term yield. This does not mean avoiding technology or development. It means aligning them with the realities of the place rather than imposing abstract plans. Architecture that responds to climate, agriculture that works with soil cycles, infrastructure designed for variability rather than static conditions. A guest learns the rhythms of the house. When floors flood, they adjust. When rooms overheat, they change behavior. They do not demand the building stop responding to gravity or weather. Earth has rhythms too. Seasonal shifts, climatic cycles, ecological feedbacks. Ignoring them does not stop them. It only increases the cost of adjustment later. As you rest now, you're occupying a small temporary space within a much larger system. The stability you feel is not guaranteed. It is maintained. Walls, energy, social systems, all aligned momentarily. This does not mean instability is imminent. It means stability is conditional. Guests tend to appreciate conditions precisely because they know they are conditional. Comfort feels less like an entitlement and more like a fortunate alignment. That appreciation can change how choices are made. Ownership language often frames environmental concern as sacrifice. Giving up convenience, limiting growth, accepting loss. Guest language reframes it as etiquette. Do not break what you cannot repair. Do not consume what cannot be replaced. Do not assume you will always be welcome if you ignore the structure. Earth does not evict guests out of anger, it shifts conditions. Those shifts make some ways of living untenable. Others emerge, life continues. Understanding ourselves as guests also softens existential pressure. We are not required to justify the planet's existence or give it meaning. We're here temporarily, participating in something larger without being responsible for its continuation. This perspective allows humility without insignificance. It allows care without ownership. It allows presence without illusion of permanence. This guest mindset naturally leads into questions of meaning, value, and how humans make sense of a place that does not revolve around them. If the planet was not built to house us specifically, then significance must come from how we live here, not from why the place exists at all. Meaning is often treated as something built into the world, as if it were a feature like gravity or temperature, waiting to be discovered rather than constructed. Many people grow up with the quiet assumption that if you look closely enough, the planet itself will reveal why things exist and what they are for. But once you accept that Earth was not designed with humans in mind, that it operates without intention or preference, that assumption begins to loosen. The world keeps going whether anyone understands it or not, and yet meaning does not disappear. It simply changes where it comes from. On a planet that was not made for meaning, significance is not delivered automatically. It does not arrive embedded in landscapes or encoded in natural laws. Mountains do not exist to inspire. Oceans do not exist to comfort. Seasons do not exist to mark the passage of personal milestones. These things happen because energy moves, matter interacts, and systems evolve. Any meaning attached to them is added later, by minds capable of reflection. This realization can feel destabilizing at first. If the world itself does not provide meaning, then where does it come from? What anchors purpose if there is no built-in plan? But this question assumes that meaning must be imposed from above, rather than assembled from within. It assumes that significance only counts if it is guaranteed by something larger than ourselves. In practice, human meaning has always been constructed locally. Even in cultures that believed in cosmic plans, meaning was lived out through daily choices, relationships, responsibilities, and stories. The idea that meaning must be universal to be valid is itself a human invention, not a requirement of reality. Consider how meaning functions in ordinary life. A meal matters not because the universe designated it as important, but because it nourishes a body and often connects people. A conversation matters because it changes how someone feels or thinks. A memory matters because it shapes future decisions. None of these meanings are diminished by the fact that the planet does not care whether they happen. In fact, meaning becomes more flexible when it is not assumed to be pre-written. It can respond to context. It can evolve. It can vary between people and cultures without losing legitimacy. On a planet that does not enforce a single narrative, multiple narratives can coexist. Earth's indifference removes one kind of pressure. There is no requirement to align your life with a cosmic purpose you might fail to understand. There is no hidden standard against which you are being measured. The planet does not keep score. It does not reward alignment or punish deviation. It simply continues. This does not make human choices insignificant. It makes them self-determined. Meaning arises not because the world demands it, but because conscious beings seek coherence within experience. We notice patterns, we remember, we anticipate, we care. These capacities generate meaning as a byproduct of awareness interacting with time. Time itself plays a central role here. Humans experience life as a sequence. Past influences present. Present choices influence future possibilities. Meaning often emerges from how those sequences are interpreted. A hardship becomes meaningful when it leads to learning. A relationship becomes meaningful because it persists through change. A project becomes meaningful because effort accumulates over time. Earth provides time, but not interpretation. It offers cycles and change, not narratives. Humans supply the narrative layer. This does not make it artificial in a dismissive sense. Language is artificial too, and yet it shapes reality profoundly. When meaning is treated as something Earth should provide, disappointment is common. Natural disasters feel unjust. Random loss feels unacceptable. Suffering feels misplaced. But when meaning is understood as something humans generate in response to conditions, those experiences change character. They remain painful, but they no longer contradict an assumed promise. This shift can reduce existential anxiety. If the planet was never supposed to make sense on human terms, then confusion is not a failure. It is expected. Uncertainty is not a flaw in the system. It is part of how a non-intentional world operates. Meaning then becomes an active process rather than a passive discovery. It is built through engagement rather than revelation. Humans decide what to value based on needs, relationships, and consequences. Those values guide behavior. Behavior shapes experience. Experience feeds back into values. This loop is visible everywhere. Communities decide what matters and organize accordingly. Cultures emphasize different virtues. Individuals prioritize different goals. None of this requires Earth's endorsement. It requires only that people care. Care itself does not come from the planet. It comes from nervous systems that evolved to respond to stimuli and from social structures that reinforce connection. Caring is not cosmic. It is biological and cultural, but its effects are real. On a planet indifferent to meaning, care becomes especially important because nothing else guarantees consideration. There is no external force ensuring fairness, compassion, or continuity. Humans generate those conditions when they choose to. This is not a burden imposed by a silent universe. It is an opportunity created by it. The absence of prescribed meaning allows for responsiveness. It allows humans to adjust values as circumstances change. It allows learning rather than obedience. Even grief takes on a different shape in this context. Loss hurts not because something sacred was violated, but because bonds were real and finite. The pain reflects connection, not cosmic injustice. Meaning in grief arises from remembering, honouring, and carrying forward what mattered, not from explaining why it happened. Joy works the same way. Pleasure does not need to be sanctioned by the universe to be valid. A moment of rest, laughter, or calm matters because it affects a living system positively. That is enough. The idea that meaning must be permanent to be real is another assumption that weakens under scrutiny. Many meaningful experiences are brief. They do not last forever. Their value lies in their effect, not their duration. Earth itself demonstrates this constantly. Landscapes form and erode. Ecosystems rise and fall. Nothing lasts indefinitely, yet everything has impact while it exists. Humans are no different. When meaning is detached from permanence, it becomes easier to accept change. Roles shift. Identities evolve. What mattered once may matter less later, and that does not invalidate it. It reflects adaptation. This adaptability is essential on a planet that changes without regard for human plans. Fixed meanings struggle under shifting conditions. Flexible meanings endure. As you rest now, your own sense of meaning may feel quiet or distant. That does not mean it is absent. It means attention is elsewhere. Meaning does not demand constant awareness. It reappears when engaged. The stillness of rest often strips away narratives temporarily. Without tasks or goals, the mind loosens its grip on explanation. This can feel empty or peaceful depending on expectation. In a world not made for meaning, emptiness is not a problem to solve. It is a state that can be inhabited briefly. From that state, meaning can re-emerge gently, shaped by what you return to caring about when you wake. Relationships, curiosity, responsibility. None of these are dictated by the planet. They are chosen within it. This perspective does not require rejecting science or embracing cynicism. It aligns well with how Earth actually works. Systems operate, life adapts, consciousness reflects, meaning arises where reflection meets experience. Humans often search for meaning in extremes, in grand explanations or ultimate answers. But on a planet indifferent to such answers, meaning often functions best at human scale, in decisions that affect others, in patterns of care, in understanding limits. There is no contradiction between living meaningfully and accepting that the world was not designed for that purpose. In fact, the two fit together cleanly. Meaning does not need endorsement from the environment to influence behavior and experience. Long after the question of belonging fades into the background, something simpler remains. You are here, right now, on a planet that keeps moving whether you're awake or asleep, attentive or distracted, hopeful or tired. Earth does not wait for acknowledgement. It does not slow its rotation when you close your eyes. It does not soften its gravity when your muscles relax. And yet, within that indifference, sleep becomes possible. Not because the planet noticed you, but because conditions, for this moment, allow rest. Sleep is one of the most revealing states humans enter. It strips away control, intention, and vigilance. You cannot force yourself to sleep successfully. You can only create circumstances that make it more likely, then let go. In that sense, falling asleep mirrors the larger relationship humans have with Earth. You do not command it. You negotiate briefly, then yield. When you fall asleep, awareness narrows. The mind releases its grip on explanations, plans, and interpretations. The body continues operating, guided by systems older than language. Breathing continues, circulation adjusts, temperature regulation shifts. Muscles relax and tense in subtle cycles. None of this requires the planet's approval. None of it receives acknowledgement. Earth does not recognize that you are sleeping. Somewhere, wind is moving across open land. Somewhere, waves are breaking against a shore. Somewhere, pressure is building beneath the surface. None of these processes pause. They do not align themselves with your rest. They proceed according to energy gradients and physical laws. This is not neglect. It is neutrality. Humans often associate safety with being seen. A sleeping child feels safer when watched. A resting person feels calmer knowing someone is nearby. On a planetary scale, there is no watcher, there is no guardian presence. And yet, sleep happens anyway, millions of times each night, because safety is not guaranteed by attention. It is produced by temporary alignment. The room you're in holds its shape against gravity. The air remains breathable. The temperature stays within tolerable range. These conditions exist not because Earth cares, but because forces currently balance. That balance may not exist everywhere, it may not exist forever, but it exists here, now. This is enough. Falling asleep on a planet that never noticed us can feel unsettling if you expect reassurance from the world itself. But if you release that expectation, the indifference becomes strangely peaceful. There is no performance required, no role to fulfill, no cosmic purpose to live up to before rest is allowed. Sleep does not require meaning. It requires only that the body be safe enough to let go. Throughout human history, sleep has always involved risk. Predators, weather, cold, hunger. Rest meant vulnerability. Early humans slept lightly, waking often, attuned to sound and movement. Over time, shelters improved, fire reduced danger, social groups shared vigilance, sleep deepened, but never fully detached from risk. Even now, sleep remains conditional. Noise interrupts it, stress fragments it, temperature disturbs it. Earth does not adjust to protect your rest. You adjust to find places and conditions where rest can occur. The fact that you can sleep at all is not evidence of a caring planet. It is evidence of adaptation layered on adaptation. Biological rhythms synchronized with rotation. Cultural practices arranged around night and day. Technologies buffering extremes. Social systems providing relative security. All of this exists within a world that does not acknowledge its impact. When humans imagine a planet that notices them, they often imagine comfort as a given. A world that wants you here. A world that makes space for your needs. Earth does not do that. It makes no promises, and yet the absence of promises removes the pressure to deserve rest. You do not need to justify sleeping. You do not need to earn it through productivity or understanding. Sleep is not a reward granted by the planet. It is a biological requirement that persists regardless of how the world feels about you. As consciousness fades, thoughts loosen. Questions that felt heavy earlier lose urgency. What if Earth was never meant for humans? The question does not need an answer before sleep arrives. It does not need resolution. It can remain open, unfinished, suspended. The planet is full of unfinished processes. Rivers carve valleys without completing them. Mountains rise and erode without reaching final form. Species evolve without arriving at perfection. Sleep fits naturally into this pattern. It is a pause, not a conclusion. Earth does not care whether you fall asleep quickly or slowly. It does not measure your rest. It does not track your dreams. Those experiences belong entirely to you and to the systems within your body. Dreams themselves are another reminder of this separation. While the planet continues its indifferent motion, your mind creates narratives disconnected from physical surroundings. Memory, emotion, and imagination mix freely. None of it reflects Earth's intentions. None of it needs to. This internal world exists alongside the external one without influencing it. The planet does not respond to dreams, and yet dreams influence how humans wake, think, and act. Meaning arises internally, even as the external world remains unchanged. Falling asleep becomes an act of trust, not in the planet, but in the moment. Trust that conditions will hold long enough. Trust that the body will continue functioning without conscious oversight. Trust that awareness can release control without immediate consequence. This trust is not guaranteed. It is learned through repetition. Night after night, rest happens. Not everywhere, not always, but often enough to become expected. Expectation does not bind the planet, it binds perception. Earth continues its cycles whether expectations are met or not. Tides rise and fall, temperatures shift, energy moves. These processes are vast and impersonal. They do not need you awake, they do not need you asleep. And yet, within that vastness, your rest matters to you. It restores capacity, it supports health, it allows attention to return tomorrow. Meaning does not come from Earth noticing this. Meaning comes from how rest affects life. There is a quiet humility in sleeping on a planet that does not notice you. It places you accurately within scale. You're not central, you're not irrelevant. You're present briefly within conditions that allow experience. This humility can be calming. Without the need to matter cosmically, you are free to matter locally, to your body, to your relationships, to the moments you participate in. As sleep approaches, the question of ownership dissolves. You do not own the night. You do not control the planet's motion through space. You occupy a narrow window of tolerability and let consciousness drift. Earth does not care if you're comfortable, but comfort exists anyway, assembled piece by piece. Mattress, walls, temperature, quiet. These are human arrangements, not planetary gifts. There is no shame in relying on them. Reliance does not require acknowledgement from the world. It reflects understanding of limits. As your breathing slows, the earlier ideas soften. Earth as system, evolution as indifferent, technology as translation. None of these concepts need to be held tightly now. They can sit in the background, incomplete, unresolved. Sleep does not solve questions, it suspends them. On a planet that never noticed us, rest is not a dialogue, it is a release. The world continues, you pause, both are allowed. Somewhere, far from where you are, conditions are extreme. Heat, cold, pressure, motion. Somewhere else, life adapts. Somewhere else, systems reorganize. None of this requires your attention tonight. Here, now, conditions are narrow but sufficient. Gravity holds you gently. Air remains breathable. Temperature stays within range. For this stretch of time, the negotiation is quiet. That quiet does not signal safety forever. It signals a moment where nothing needs immediate response. Falling asleep does not mean surrendering importance. It means recognizing that importance does not depend on being noticed by the planet. Earth will not remember this night. It will not record your rest. It will not mark the moment you drift off. You will. And that is enough. The planet keeps turning. The systems keep running. Within that motion, you let awareness loosen and rest take over. Not because the world invited you to sleep, but because life, briefly and quietly, allows it and carries on without interruption as you drift into it.